This is an audio test for the meeting stream.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Councillor Leeper.
How are you doing?
Good afternoon.
Okay, it is 5:31 by my the clock in front. I think we've got oh, sorry, maybe we'll just give it another minute because I see we are getting a few others joining. So we'll just give another minute and then we'll get started. If that's okay. Okay, it's now 5:32, so let's get started. So good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you all for joining us for this evening's Planning Advisory Committee. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube, and the meeting recording will also be uploaded to the city's agendas and minutes portal after the meeting. I have received regrets from 3 members, Ball, Berggraf, and Wang. But before we get started, I'll ask the committee coordinator to call the roll. Members in Zoom, if you could just please unmute yourselves as your name is called. Thank you.
Member Ball,
Present.
Member Berggraf, Member Huang, Member Karakassis,
Present.
Member Lank,
Here.
Member Nerudin, Member Rivet, Member Robert,
Here.
Member Sun,
Yeah, here.
Vice Chair White,
Here.
Chair McKenzie.
Present.
You have quorum, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And welcome again to Councillor Leeper as well, of course. Just before proceeding with the agenda, I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce Andrew El-Azi, and please correct my pronunciation of the last name if needed. Andrew will be the new committee coordinator. He's a new coordinator with the council and committee services branch and will be coordinating future planning advisory committee meetings. Andrew, did you want to take a minute just to introduce yourself briefly?
Absolutely. Thank you to the chair, to members of the advisory committee, and to non-voting member Councillor Leeper. I look forward to assisting you in the important work the advisory committee undertakes and in its next meeting of the year. Thanks a lot.
Terrific. Thanks, Andrew, and welcome. We'll now proceed with the agenda, or to begin with, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations for this meeting? Hearing none, we'll move to confirmation of minutes. Are the minutes confirmed? Thank you, Vice Chair. Confirmed. Thank you.
Madam Chair, just a question.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
On the minutes. I'm assuming that either there's an error in the election of myself as vice chair in terms of the date, or my term is ending tomorrow. Perhaps staff could clarify that. The last line of that section indicates a term ending February 2025. That's correct. I'm fine with that, but I'm not so sure that that's the date.
Chair, if you recall, initially the chair and the vice chair were elected in February 2024 for a term of 1 year. And the intent was to match the term of the chair and the vice chair so that the elections could be held together. So at the next regular meeting of Planning Advisory Committee, there would then be the opportunity to then hold the election for the chair, vice chair for a further year or the remainder of the term, whatever the committee is comfortable with.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so moving along really to the first substantive item. The first item is the adoption of the PAC's Planning Advisory Committee's procedure bylaw. Members will recall that at our February 22nd meeting last year, we approved a similar report and received procedural training from members. This report includes the adoption of a revised bylaw. As noted in the report on this item, the updates clarify the language in the bylaw rather than making substantive changes. This new procedure bylaw was approved by council as part of the midterm governance review on January 29th, 2025. Are there any questions about this from members of this committee? Okay. Seeing none, can we carry the report recommendations as per the, I don't know if I need to read out but report recommendations as set out in the 2022 to 2026 midterm governance review report approved by City Council on January 29th. The Planning Advisory Committee approves the replacement Planning Advisory Committee procedure bylaw. So are we carried on that? Yep. Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving right along to the presentation of the draft 2025 work program for the Planning, Development, and Building Services Department, which is really the substantive item for tonight's meeting. I'll ask that staff provide an overview of this item, and after the slide presentation, members will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff and provide any comments. And we've got, I think, 3 members of staff here this evening, and thank you very much for your time here this evening to make the presentation to committee.
Hello, Chair. Thank you very much. Eric, I believe you have the presentation. Oh, Andrew, thank you. Hi, so just to start, I want to thank you for having us here this evening. In a brief introduction, I'm Connie Gleason. I am the manager of the Business and Technical Support Service within the Business Development and Building Services Department, and I bring with me 2 of my colleagues, Royce Fu, Manager of Policy Planning, and Court Curry, Manager Right-of-Way, Heritage, and Urban Design. Okay, next slide, please. To start, I would like to share with you our mandate and vision. So the mandate of the Planning, Development, Building Services Department is let's be the most livable mid-sized city in North America. Next slide. So we've recently had some changes to our department, and this is our new management structure, just setting this up here. So Vivi Chi is the interim manager of the department, and then we have under Vivi, we have John Buck, Chief Building Officer, Derek Moody, the Director of Planning Services, Sean Moore, who's the Director of the Park for the Lansdowne Park Redevelopment, myself, the Manager of the Business and Technical Support Services, Court Curry, the Manager of Right-of-Way, Heritage, and Urban Design, and Jennifer Armstrong, who is the the Director of Transportation Planning. Okay, next slide. So some of you may be aware, in April of 2022, a new department was developed within the city called the Strategic Initiatives Department. This department saw the reorganization of the planning department with economic development, corporate real estate, climate change and housing, moving to the new Strategic Initiatives Department. This department is focused on delivering council's highest priorities, and we continue to work with them directly on a lot of the cross-references between our departments. Next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the department and some of the changes that have happened since April of 2024. So next slide, please. So Planning, Development, and Building Services, we have 4 groups: the Building Code Services, Business Technical Support Services, Planning Services, and Right-of-Way, Heritage, and Urban Design. You'll note that I did not mention Transportation Planning here, as their mandate is not within this group. Okay, next slide. So to start off with Building Code Services, run by John Buck, the Chief Building Officer, Building Code Services is the regulatory body which administers the Ontario Building Act. Building Code. The Ontario Building Code establishes uniform medium standards for health, life safety, fire protection, access, energy efficiency, and structural sufficiency that must be included in the design and construction of all buildings and facilities within the city. This group reviews the plans, issues permits, and performs all inspections on all new buildings and facilities within the city. Next slide, please. So the business and technical support services, this is my group. We work closely with all members of the department in delivering innovative and strategic services to the group and their stakeholders. We manage and facilitate our engagement, our public engagement on various items that come through the department. And we also work very closely with the city manager's office, mayor's office, members of council, and our Indigenous communities. Next slide, please. So planning services. Planning services is a very important, as this committee knows, is a very important role in the city of Ottawa. By managing the evolution of the city, we are helping to enhance the quality of life so the people can live, prosper, and connect in neighborhoods, buildings, and spaces that are vibrant, well-designed, safely built, and sustainable. The following are some of the main objectives that we do. So we conduct multi reviews and approvals on development applications on geographical basis, including planning, engineering, urban design, parks, environment and trees, transportation and heritage. And as well, we also update the online development tool applications to ensure it's providing information on current development. We also provide technical support, compliance support, and zoning reports. So to introduce you again to Royce, the policy planning unit, which is led by Royce, was formed in 2024, and they lead the official plan amendments, secondary plan studies, growth management and land supply, as well as zoning bylaw interpretation and the new zoning bylaw project. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to pass you over to Court Curry to give a little bit of a rundown of his service area.
Good evening, and nice to see everyone. Thanks so much, Connie. Right Away Heritage and Urban Design Service Area has 6 branches. First one is our Heritage Planning branch, which operates under the authority of the Ontario Heritage Act, bringing forward files to our Built Heritage Committee. Second branch is our Public Realm and Urban Design Group that oversees the development of our urban design guidelines, provides design review through the development review process. Our third, Geospatial Analytics and Technology Solutions, tongue twister, provides a lot of the data and layers you see on our Geo Ottawa, and undertakes our aerial mapping and many of the products that support our official plan and our zoning bylaw. Right of Way is really a regulatory group that provides oversight of the use of our roads by the construction sector and our utilities. Surveys and Mapping is our legal city surveyor group that provides surveying expertise for capital construction and city projects. And finally, our inspections group undertakes quality assurance inspections in our, whether it's for development, water, or right-of-way inspections such as road cuts. With that high-level overview, I'll provide it back or toss the baton back to Connie, rather. Thanks.
Thank you, Court. Next slide, please. So in August 2023, the Planning and Housing Committee received it was PRED at the time, we are now the PDBS. Our acronyms seem to have changed frequently, the work program. And then, sorry, apologies. We had previously consulted with this committee, the initial work plan at the beginning of the term in February of 2024. So I would like to go on now. So I believe everybody received a copy of our work plan.
Yep.
So I would now like to be able to turn it over to any questions that we may have on the work plan. So what we will do is we'll go through, and if there's any questions specifically on the work plan that was provided to you, we are here, myself, Court, and Royce are here to address those questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that overview. Now I'll turn it over to any members with any questions about the work plan, the document that was provided earlier. Are there any questions on the work plan? Okay, Anna, can I go to you?
Okay, my question is about the rental replacement bylaw. What's the status of that right now? It says that it's to be initiated this year.
So I can speak to that. So we are right now looking to do a feasibility study and a municipal scan and report back to council, our committee and council later on this year on the feasibility of a bylaw. We are initiating that work, so we're still very preliminary in our work on that, but it will be coming forward at the end of this year.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Member White, Vice Chair White?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question, I think, to Connie. There was some time ago, there was a media report, and I think it was a mayor's meeting that he brought up the concept of a mayor's committee task force for streamlining development approvals. And I'm wondering, I think I brought this question up the last meeting where I did present it to staff earlier. I'm wondering what the role of the department is, or if there is any role of the department in that. I'm assuming there will be in that task force that the mayor has announced, and also wondering if there's any role contemplated for this committee in that task force effort.
So I am going to pass this over your question. Thank you very much for your question. I'm going to pass it over to Royce Fu, who is part of the task force, the housing task force, and can kind of give you a brief overview. I'm sure you can appreciate this was just announced in, I think, the last council meeting in January. So it is still very preliminary in its design. But Royce, if I can pass it over to you.
Thanks, Connie. So Chair, the January 29th council meeting, this motion on housing process was carried. There were about a dozen items, and actually one other item relating to a development of a housing dashboard. On February 19th, Planning Housing Committee staff presented a draft of what that housing dashboard could look like. I invite members to take a look at the YouTube video from that meeting, or you could find it on the agenda, ottawa.ca agenda sort of video clip there. We do show the number of dwellings that have been approved through applications, the number of dwellings that have been issued building permits, and the number of housing CMHC starts and completions. We're looking to receive some feedback, fine-tune that board, specifically a board relating to our timelines for applications, and hoping to go live sometime in April on ottawa.ca. In terms of the remaining 12 initiatives on there, the task force is led by the Department of Strategic Initiatives. About half of those initiatives are more focused on how we dispose of our real estate and programs that are related to that disposal piece. Planning staff within this department are involved on other initiatives such as streamlining building code services, the urban design review process, and planning around transit. My understanding of this date is that the task force will consult with external stakeholders, including the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association, GOBA, and the Building Operator Managers Association, BOMA, both who are represented on this committee with their respective members. And with those stakeholders, we're looking at ways to explore how we can advance housing.
Thank you.
Sorry, Member Sun, did you want to go ahead? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I do have two questions about the planning departments. So I remember this year the official plan will have the periodical review. That review will consider new provincial planning statement, policy statement 2024.
Yes, Chair. So we will be bringing forward an official plan amendment this spring. We're looking at having our first special public meeting sometime in April. And that will be to update the official plan to be consistent with the 2024 provincial planning statement. Some elements we're looking at are updating the official plan to have policies that will enable Sullivan area expansions, looking at strategic growth areas and intensification around major transit stations, and even right down to the weeds, such as residential uses on agricultural lands.
Thank you. My second question is regarding the new zoning bylaw. I got a lot of questions about, I know the new zoning will be in place next year, 2026, spring. Does city know or take new application this year before the new zoning bylaw in place? Do we take the application this year? Will we?
So, Chair, the timeline for the new zoning bylaw will be sometime in December of this year, perhaps even into January 2026. There is a 20-day appeal period after that, and I think there's a good chance that the zoning bylaw would be appealed. In that case, there would be a transition element. So the existing zoning bylaw 2008-250 would still be in force. So we would still receive applications, and those applications would look at amending the existing zoning bylaw. Depending on the timing of the application, if it's getting close to the resolution of any appeals, which could take up to a year or longer, the applicants would have to be mindful of amendments that may have to go forward for the existing bylaw and perhaps the new bylaw, depending on when the new bylaw would be in full force and effect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions about the work plan? Comments, questions? No? Okay. I have a few, so maybe I'll not in no particular order, I suppose. Well, maybe I guess starting with one of the first slides that we looked at talked about reiterated the city's vision, the high level vision, which is to become the most livable mid-sized North American city, which I think is a great vision. I think we can all get around that. One of the things I think it would be useful though in terms of looking at the work plan and having a sense of the so many key elements of activity and work to support that would be to understand what the objectives are to support how we are to reach that vision, what the objectives are, and we talked about this previously, I suppose, but also how we're going to measure reaching those objectives. So I'm just wondering if that's something that Royce, maybe you could I could ask you to speak to that just to start.
Thank you, Chair. So the tagline of being the most livable mid-sized city in North America was really the vision of the official plan review process.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that, sort of the objectives, we call them the big 5 moves. And I'll try and quickly go through them, but the first move was to achieve by the end of the planning period more growth through intensification. By 2046, most of our transportation trips would be sustainable modes. Improve our sophistication in urban community design. And that really speaks to the transect elements in the official plan that look at not only designations, but sort of the interrelationship with how properties are within an area and their form and function. Big policy move, talked about embedding environmental, climate, health resiliency, and energy into the framework of our planning policies. And big policy move 5 was really looking at embedding economic development into the framework of our planning policies. So those are the big 5 objectives that are sort of the next layer underneath that big vision. And a lot of the items in the work program really implement specific elements of any one or multiple of those big 5 moves.
Okay, thanks. Because when I was just, obviously walking through all the elements of the work plan under the category of, I guess, ongoing or underway, I think there were 24 separate activities there. And I believe 14 of those have been pushed out past the original date that we expected to land those, so to speak, pushed out to 26 or 27 or beyond, I'm not sure. And which seems like a lot. And so I'm just wondering, I guess right off the top, I mean, two that stand out for me that remain as priorities, top priorities for 2025 are, of course, the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, a huge exercise, obviously, and the employment survey as well. And so those ones certainly not going to be pushing those out, need to land those this year. But I'm just wondering, I guess, given 16 of the or 14 of the 24 have been pushed in some cases considerably out, like 2.5 years out from when we first anticipated we would see those completed. Maybe you can just speak a little bit to how what the criteria is, how those have been prioritized or reprioritized, and I guess what the main causes of so many projects being, I'll say, delayed, I suppose, but I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, it's hard to have a generalized statement for how some projects would be pushed out, because some, depending on a project, there could be very different reasons for that. Just some high level things to keep in mind is that the city has come through, our priorities have also been changing, not only through the different crises that council has enacted, such as the housing crisis or the climate change emergency, but we've also seen changes lately that we were not cognizant of back in 2023. And a really good example are all the different changes that occurred at the provincial level that trickled down to us. And there are multiple bills, changes to our provincial planning statements, bills that impact how we would process applications, and even just some of the comments on bicycle lanes and how does that fit into secondary plans kind of delays some of that work going on. At the same time, staff is in a bit of a transition mode from the previous I guess senior leadership. We're still looking for a general manager. We've had staff retire, and we also had staff changing their sort of how they operate from working at home and trying to make those connections in teams as well. And so a lot of those factors can contribute to how projects are either shifted in priority or took longer than it was initially thought of or estimated a couple of years ago.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of important work there. And it sounds like the department is under a lot of pressure, resourcing. And as you say, it's been a incredibly active year, I guess, in terms of policy coming out of from the provincial level that you're having to deal with as well. Okay. I guess another question that I had in a different track was specific to the comprehensive zoning bylaw review. And I wonder if you can just walk through a little bit of the consultation plan what we can expect to see, fairly high level, but around the zoning bylaw, particularly obviously after the second draft of that lands at the end of March, as I understand it.
The Chair, I can't get into it too much. Staff is bringing forward a report at the end of March that will provide a more fulsome description of what that public consultation will look like. Draft 2 will go public sometime at the end of March, start of April, at which point we will start that consultation process. We are looking at having virtual sessions that are citywide for folks to join in. When we look back to what we did last year, we looked at the number of people participating in the consultation process for the zoning bylaw. We had the greatest success for a number of people at all of our virtual sessions. So we want to continue that type of format to get as many people engaged as possible. We're also looking at having an in-person session as well. Depending on location, we got to find a location that's geographically a right fit. And then we're also looking at having some surveys so we can get some direct feedback from the general public on some of the issues that we've heard from draft 1 and want to get an idea of some options from the general public on how we would move forward. So I invite you to stay tuned to that report that will come out at the end of March. That will provide a bit more fulsome schedule of what that consultation will look like.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe I'll just add, I chair this committee, but I'm also the rep for the FCA, the Federation of Citizens Associations, and I'll just say that the FCA it has an intention to try and organize a multi-stakeholder planning workshop in early May to test drive some of the zoning that policy, the proposals that we'll see in the second draft with actual building sites, looking at high-rise, neighborhood, hub and corridor, all the various elements, perhaps focused, by transect as well. So I'm hoping we might assume that zoning staff, members of the zoning team, might be able to participate in that type of a workshop, subject to more detailed logistical plans, et cetera, for that type of an exercise. I mean, we'll obviously be hopefully very much at a rolling up the sleeves and getting pretty granular in terms of any feedback and comments to your team.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. That's actually one thing I forgot to also note was in draft 1, we also had many dedicated workshops with the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association and the FCA. I believe we had almost a dozen type of working sessions with the groups. So we will also continue those dialogues with those two groups. So our zoning staff will very much look forward to connecting with the FCA and GOBA and working out what consultation and draft 2 will look like.
Great. Okay, thank you. Just returning back to a couple of specific projects in the work plan that I noticed have been put off by these ones fall into sort of 2.5 years. And these other, maybe Court, you're probably best to answer this. I'm looking at the urban design guidelines for low-rise infill development as well as mid-rise buildings. And I'm just wondering, given, well, I would say the importance of those guidelines as we move forward, the plans for intensification, those now we're looking at, they were meant to have come in 2023 and 2024 respectively. We're now looking at those being pushed into, well, Q1 2026, hopefully. But I'm just wondering if those those seem pretty important. I guess what I'm trying to say, and I'm wondering if those wouldn't be better aligned with the zoning bylaw work that's in hand now.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Chair, and that's specifically directly the rationale for their realignment. We do have low-rise design guidelines, as you're aware, that are on the books. We did do some housekeeping amendments to those guidelines to bring them more in conformity with the new official plan. So that is the live guidelines that are now used by the industry and by staff in processing applications. We don't have any mid-rise design guidelines, and so those ones are under development at present. but that work is being done in lockstep with the zoning bylaw work. There was no point in establishing fresh new mid-rise design guidelines when we have a zoning bylaw that is very form-based. We want them to speak to each other. So my team and Royce's team are working hand in glove to ensure that they align, and that we will follow up with our guidelines very shortly after the conclusion of council's approval of the zoning bylaw.
Okay, yeah, that's terrific. I guess just really looking for reassurance that we're looking to bring those in, as you say, hand. That's great. One other thing, and I'll just look to see if anyone raises their hand, and then I'll jump off and let others jump in. But I'll just go ahead. One other question. Back in 2021, staff had submitted a report to this committee and subsequently council, which contained the 15-minute neighborhood baseline report. And there was a disposition at the time that staff would look at opportunities to rerun that analysis to see how scores had improved compared to the baseline scores found in that study. I'm not aware of any progress report submitted after that date. It's not, and there's no indication of that work in this work plan, even something being bumped into 2026. And I'm just wondering if we could get a sense of, because I do think that that's going to be very important. When an updated analysis will be provided, it will be in 2026, which would be the 5-year mark, or when could we expect that?
So, Chair, that report is there are multiple events that occurred to push that report off. The biggest one is going to be the 2024 PPS, which has really required us to use provincial population projections to do our growth work. And so a new work program that you see on this list is the growth update. That is a big component that's using the same staff that would have been in 15-minute neighborhoods is now working on that. And that was a bit of a priority given the change of the PPS to update our growth projections. The other elements that we need for an update to 15-minute neighborhood report is an update to an employment survey, and that is not quite finished. A second element that we need is to have an update on the AI that was used in the first draft. We need to have an update with so we're hoping to partner with a post-secondary institution to see how we can use an AI modeling for some of those pedestrian connections and the safety scores. And then the third connection would be on having updating a survey methodology so that it is more randomized than what we had used during COVID. So with the bump in priority due to the growth update and the convergence of those three other things, we're hopeful that can happen. We can start the project in perhaps 2026.
Okay. Again, sort of going back to my earlier question about priorities and many projects being pushed off, and there's some sequencing issues there, obviously. But to what extent are just staff resources an issue for the department to achieve the work plan? Is that how much of an issue is that? I think we're all aware that the comprehensive zoning bylaw team is half what was anticipated was needed. And so they're carrying an immense load to get this through and cross the finish line by the end of the year. I'm sure that those staff shortages, I'll say, does have an impact on the ability of the department to deliver, to engage the public, number of things, obviously.
Yeah, most certainly does. The staff resources is limited. That's why we have to reprioritize. For 15-minute neighborhoods, also that outreach for that partnership with a post-secondary institution on how we can leverage AI to do some of the work or the second half of that work, which would be looking at the pedestrian connections and the safety scores.
Right. Okay. And I think maybe my last question was, as I was just reviewing the documents, I had to actually remind myself that housing, and you mentioned earlier the housing is now part of the strategic initiatives group and has been moved out, so to speak. Because I was looking at looking in the work plan, I said, where's this? This is we've declared a crisis in housing, and I don't see anything in the work plan. And then, yes, right, it's been moved out. So I guess the next question that I had was, well, how is the, and I know this is a new structure, but I think it would be really important to ensure that there's really good coordination and laser focus on coordination between what's going on in the strategic initiatives group focused on housing and what the planning, what's happening on the planning side of the house. So maybe, and again, sort of going back to this idea of making sure that everyone's rowing in the same direction by having very clear objectives and ability to measure achievement of those objectives, I would think would be very important. So maybe you can just speak to that a bit.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will say that the housing actually hasn't dropped off the work plan. The housing is very much front and center. Anytime any item you see secondary plan, so whether this is Taywin secondary plan or the Algonquin Station secondary plan, those are plans to enable housing, either to have housing closer to transit or have more housing in the right locations and the best connections to transit, all the way to the Greenfield secondary plans where we are creating new communities. The new zoning bylaw is looking at very much the same thing as of right, providing a framework that's easier, enable housing, not only those locations close to transit, but how do we implement the Bill 23 3 units permission and Housing Accelerator Fund 4 units per land on a lot permission throughout the urban area. At the very last page of the work plan, you'll see items reported annually or quarterly. This is very much our residential land supply within the urban area, within the rural area. We monitor, we're also looking at a residential intensification monitoring program, and we are tracking applications that we actually have to report to the province and how many dwellings are in those applications. And we're also reporting that information, same information through what we used to call the residential dwelling pipeline, which is now going to be renamed as the housing dashboard. So there's a lot of housing that's reflected in this work plan. I think I probably even missed a few on here. We are also still very much working with strategic initiatives on the housing. So we spoke earlier about how the housing process task force is led by strategic initiatives. We are still part of that task force working on those other initiatives to see how we can unlock that housing and get that housing moving faster. So we are very much working together on that housing file with that department.
Right. Okay, thank you. I think those are all the questions that I had or comments. Are there any other questions or comments for other members or Councillor Leeper? Nope. Okay. Well, I think that that if there are no more questions, then I think I'll thank staff for their presentation and for the discussion and being here to provide additional detail on the work plan. Is the presentation received by members? Okay. Received, thank you. Are there any other notices of motion for consideration at the next meeting then? Okay, seeing none, any formal written inquiries? I expect not. Any other business? Okay, I think we are adjourned. So the next meeting date is not set yet, but members will be advised when that information is available. And I'd like to thank everyone for their time, staff in particular, for taking time out of their evenings, and Councillor Leeper as well, and all the members for participating. So thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night.